I'm Isaac Bauman, the cinematographer of They Will Kill You, as well as Faces of Death, and you're listening to the Cinematography podcast. Basically, there was no way to just put the light and have it work for everything, and I saw that right away, and even though it cost me like 20 minutes to move the light back and forth like a dozen plus times, which sucked, we're going to keep this consistent, we're going to have a game plan. It's just about maintaining the look by the altar and maintaining the look in the larger space.
This is Cinepod, the Cinematography podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Presented by Hot Rod Cameras. I'm your host, Ben Rock. Today on our show, we speak with cinematographer Isaac Bauman, who we had on earlier when he was shooting Loki. If you go to the movie theater right now, he has not one, but two horror movies in theaters currently. We were set to talk to him about We Will Kill You. And then the night before my interview, I went to a pre-screening of Faces of Death, only to find out that it was also shot by Isaac. In this episode, we dive into how Isaac worked with the directors of both They Will Kill You and Faces of Death to carefully map out a brilliant and specific look and visual plan for each film, solving the big lighting challenges of They Will Kill You's climax by using a massive 18K light that had to be repeatedly moved, and how he scheduled and planned for all that, working with practical puppeteering effects on an eyeball. Spoiler alert, there's a crawling eyeball in They Will Kill You. Shooting 35mm for Faces of Death and intentionally reducing the camera's visual capabilities, Isaac used wider lenses, stopped down, and embraced the darkness, he really did, to enhance the gritty filmic quality of older movies like Silence of the Lambs and Manhunter. And if you're gonna follow in the footsteps of any movies, those are two great ones. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsessions of the week, but first find out what's going on in the entertainment industry in a little segment we sometimes like to call Close Focus. So before we get to the interview with Isaac, now is our time for our Close Focus, Ilya. What's going on? Slow news week here in Cameraland. Oh, by the way, Airy was bought.
That's true.
Should I mention that?
Yeah, you might as well mention that. And actually, you know more about it than I do because it literally was just announced like a few hours ago.
How do I know more about a camera thing than you do? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I have had a back-to-back morning of things. This was announced, and it was just sort of like one more thing in my feed of stuff. So I think you read the press release, or you read the
Well, yeah.
article.
Well, so I was hit by two people in rapid succession. One was our good friend Bill Totolo, and the other one was another good friend of ours, Mark Walpole, texted me the acquisition of Airy, and I'm like, what? Now, we've known for a while that Airy was potentially for sale, and we've even talked about discussing it on the show, but we didn't want to like kind of truck in rumor and speculation, when there wasn't anything going on, for sure. But now it's happened. Airy, and to my knowledge, this is the first time Airy's ever been acquired. Airy's always been its own company, right?
It's changed hands a little bit between the Arnolds and the Richters, the two parts of Airy. But I don't think any time else has controlling interest gone to an outside organization. So this is a first.
Yeah, so it's gone to some company I've never heard about called the Riedel Group, run by a man named Thomas Riedel or Riedel. Hope I'm getting your name right. And Tom, T-Dog as I call him, owns a company where they specialize in live event filming, sound and stuff like that. And you were saying to me that it makes sense because Airy's been trying to push into more into live event filming with the Alexa.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart move actually for Airy as well, because that is an area that they have potential for a lot of growth. They don't dominate that market. Also, it's not easily usurped by things like AI or other sort of technology going into the future. There is a market for covering live events and sporting events. And if
you give me an idea, though, because if we can make these AIs fight it out amongst each other, I would watch that. I'd like ChatGPT versus Claude. You guys go at it.
The celebrity death match of AI chatbots. All right, I get you. Okay.
Basically, they just fawn each other till the other one falls over from being fawned too much.
Also going on, there's been some layoffs in the industry recently. Sony let go a couple thousand people, it sounds like. And who else?
Oh, just a couple thousand.
Yes, exactly. Scattered about from various things. But the entertainment sector has been hit hard, and it seems to be that there are major layoffs happening at the studio system, which is never a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, part of me goes, well, it's a lot of it, I think, has to do with the merger of Warner and Paramount and just overall consolidation stuff happening. But also, we just need to see an uptick in theatrical. We need to see an uptick in production. And I think everyone's kind of scared to make stuff right now. And so there's kind of a defensive crouch going on, and less stuff has been made. But I feel like we're already off to a great theatrical start this year. Hopefully we can keep the momentum going.
According to Forbes, there's now also another major change happening at Disney with the entire Marvel Studios visual team being let go. So
what?
Yeah. This is
when you say visual, you mean visual effects?
It says visual team on this headline here. Literally this came in as
I have been in the film industry for a long time, and I have never heard the term visual team. Like, the director is a visual person. They're all visual.
Okay. Nearly all of Marvel's visual development team has been let go, with only a skeleton crew of full-time employees remaining. Those laid off include artists, designers, and technical specialists who have worked across the Marvel Cinematic Universe, movies and shows, some of whom have been there for 10 years or more.
I mean, they're just not making as many Marvel movies, so I guess that makes sense. I mean, we have a new Avengers movie coming out in a matter of months.
It's true.
And
December.
That could turn that whole ship around, but
yeah, it's interesting.
I don't
know. It's the visual development team. There's also a new Spider-Man movie that's coming out shortly. So interesting.
But that's not really Marvel. That's the Sony Spider-Man.
It is,
right?
But
they're doing it in conjunction with each other. It's part of the MCU, and we're about to get the X-Men into the MCU. And I think that their hope, I mean, the MCU was a massive cash cow. I don't know that we've ever in this industry seen anything that sweeping in that short a time. When I feel like it wasn't when the first Iron Man came out, but it might have been the second or third MCU movie came out. They released like their plan to make like 30 movies by 2019, and we were all like, get out of town. And then they did it, and all of them were successful. And then suddenly they weren't successful anymore. It's hard to say. The audience is never wrong. So, the audience got burned out on it. I feel like the Endgame cycle, finished the story, finished it big, made a lot of people satisfied. And they were like, I have enough superhero in me for a while. And, what do you do?
Yeah.
So, keeping that design team on, those people might have outstayed their own obsolescence by like 3 or 4 years, maybe. Who knows?
Actually, I think I may have misspoke. According to this press release I see here, Sony Pictures Entertainment is laying off hundreds of employees. I don't know if that calculates to be 1,000 or 2, but it says hundreds, and it's going to span film studio, television studios, and corporate. And while the studio refocuses the entertainment company on certain core growth areas and pulling back in others. So, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I don't know. And then, you were also telling me about Flanders Scientific, right?
Yeah, Flanders Scientific also acquired Atomos. Oh, sorry, excuse me, vice versa. Atomos acquired Flanders Scientific. Atomos, of course, is a larger, more, let's say, prosumer sort of focused monitor brand. Flanders Scientific, very high-end DIT post facility.
It's like the gold standard for color grading and stuff.
Really, really popular line of monitors, known for really exceptional customer service. Atomos being a more, certainly a larger company, I'm sure a larger market cap, as they say. I think it's got a lot more business than Flanders does, but very different business model. So for Atomos to saying, hey, we want to capture this high end, rather than trying to develop their own products and take over the market, instead take over a competitor, is interesting. And if Atomos, of course, is a publicly traded Australian company, and it will be interesting to see what happens, especially this year at NAB. There's already been a statement from the CEO of Flanders who came out and said, hey, those of you who love Flanders, things aren't going to change, certainly not right away, and the stuff that you love about Flanders, you're going to keep loving about Flanders. So maybe Atomos is going to be really respectful and keep it very separate for a time being, but we'll see. Interesting to see what happens. One thing is for sure, this has not been a boring year for stuff. 2026, we're only in middle of April right now.
No.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
Can't remember the last time I was bored. Anyway, oh boy.
All right. So Ben.
Hey, before we get to this, I just want to mention that with Isaac Bauman and that we get into the interview, we were going to talk to him about They Will Kill You, which is a movie that I super loved. And the night before I interviewed him, not realizing he'd shot it, I saw a pre-screening of Faces of Death. So we get into both.
That's exciting. Super cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't
Twofer.
we get to the interview now with Isaac Bauman?
Here we go. Well, firstly, thanks for coming back on the show. Always good to have people back. And like I was telling you off mic just now, I didn't realize until I was in the theater last night, we'd already scheduled this interview with you today, that you shot Faces of Death, which I saw on the big screen. So you kind of have, at the same moment in time, you kind of have two like really awesome horror projects in theaters at the same time. What is that like? Like, do you bask in the fact that you've got two theatrical horror movies? Are you a horror guy?
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those instances of when it rains, it pours.
Mm,
This has happened to me before. The last time I was on the podcast actually was for Loki season 2. And that same month, October 23, that Loki came out, I had another two horror films come out, The Haunting of the Queen Mary and
mm.
Deliver Us.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like this is the pattern. It's fun. It's overwhelming, because you have to manage both projects. They both deserve a certain amount of attention and a certain amount of, you know, elevation. And so it makes that more complicated, but it still is really exciting. And I feel incredibly blessed to have two great movies coming out at the same time.
Yeah, no, they're both really cool, and I just can't encourage people enough to see them in the theater if you're so
Thank you.
inclined. I mean, like, it takes you've got to want to see a horror movie to see both of these. But let's go into They Will Kill
Yeah.
You. They Will Kill You, I think, has just kind of like as a baseline look. There's like a real style to the way you shot it, to the way you lit it,
Hmm.
to the way the action was covered. I know people have compared it to Kill Bill. People have compared it to John Wick. Like, I feel like, because there's a lot of pretty gnarly fights in this movie, but they are so clear and well choreographed. Can you talk about how you and the director, well, first just tell me how you came onto the project, but I want to hear about how the two of you kind of developed that look and that approach.
I came on to the project originally. My agents at WPA put me up for the film, and it was just kind of one of those. The production reaches out to the agencies and the agencies throw
Mm,
people's names in the mix. I had known one of the producers on the project, Dan Kagan, and I think after my agents put me up, he was like, "Oh, Isaac, I know this guy." And that definitely helped me get in the door. But really what happened was I just had an incredible interview with the director. It was clear immediately that we shared a lot in common in terms of our taste and the way we thought about the craft of filmmaking, what we liked, what we didn't like about it. And it was one of those interviews that is going well because it just like goes on and on and on, and it's like
mm,
going on for hours, and then suddenly it's like somebody actually like has to leave, and that's the end of the interview.
mm.
And so I kind of had a pretty good sense that I was going to get the job after that. And it was funny because the director, Kirill Sokolov, who's incredibly talented, hired me. I learned later he hired me pretty much just based on the strength of that interview and our connection in the interview.
Had you prepared
And
anything?
off
Like,
of,
did you have visuals or a lookbook or anything?
I didn't actually, I've had mixed success with that. Sometimes the lookbook thing is like, if you get it right, then you are probably going to get the job.
Mm,
But if you don't get it right, you've really screwed up. And it can just give you more range to kind of feel things out and take cues off the director if you don't come in with anything prepared. Because it's like finding the look of a film to me is a conversation and it's a process. It's not something I do before I have an interview,
yeah.
So to a certain extent, anything I put together before an interview is gonna kind of be bullshit, at least for me. I'm not saying that's true for other DPs, but it's like I like to sit with something, and I like to, spend a couple weeks in pre-production watching films with the director, thinking, just staring out the window, reading the script several times. I like the process of look development to be like organic and slow and intuitive. And I find when you try to kind of come in with a pitch, you've got to fast track all that.
Yeah.
Um, and so my preference is to not build a lookbook or come in with anything prepared for an interview, unless I just have such a clear vision when I read the script.
So how much of like the design and the look and the kind of, I would say, like clean, crisp choreography was on the page, and how much of it was something that the director and you kind of figured out how to do? And I'm assuming the stunt coordinator too, because there's a lot of big stunt stuff.
Yes, um I love preparation,
Mm.
and I love being as prepared as possible. One of the things that I loved about Krill was, by the time I met him for this interview, at that time, he had already storyboarded the entire film.
Oh, wow.
So I can't really take any credit for a lot of the shot design. Things here and there on set, like adjustments, like, hey, this isn't working. Maybe we should try it more from over here. The composition of close ups and stuff like that. But like
Yeah.
the design of it was really all him and the storyboard artist, which was not the first time I'd worked that way.
Mm.
And I think it's a really cool way to work. I mean, it takes a lot off of my plate because I've done films where I was the one who shot listed the entire film by myself. Um, so although usually it's a little bit more collaborative.
Yeah.
Usually it's
I
the
always
director and the DP
when
do
I
it
hear stories
together.
like that, and I don't want to name names, obviously,
Yeah.
but I always wonder
Yeah.
what those directors think their job is if it is not to at least work with the DP to figure out how to shoot the whole thing.
Yeah. It's a good question, but I think it's a legitimate perspective. Some directors are just so concerned with the performance
Mm.
and the storytelling aspects of it, and they hire a DP that they trust and they like their work, and they want that person to do their thing.
Mm.
So I get it.
Yeah, yeah. I guess
um
that's true. And we've talked to people about like directors who are also writers, and for whom like the dialogue and the acting is is the main thing, so they'll hire whoever it is.
exactly.
I guess it makes sense, but like I don't know. It's not just you. Like I've heard that story many times, and I'm always like, when I direct something, like
Hmm.
nothing is more important to me than to kind of figure out how we're going to shoot it. Like that's
Yeah.
like it all has to come from that, and that might start with a rehearsal with the actors to figure out the basic choreography of it. But I never like I'd feel weird taking my hands completely off the wheel and being like, you figure all that out, because then you get into
Yeah.
post and you're like, oh, this doesn't cut together the way I wanted it to. Well, it's because you didn't participate in that part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
Anyway, but that notwithstanding, so you walked in and he boarded the whole thing. Like, were there
Hmm.
animatics? Were there
No
previs or anything?
animatics, but storyboards. We
Yeah,
didn't do any animatics or previs. Although, when fight choreographers and the stunt team are designing bits of action, they will previs those. They actually often pitch shots and camera movement and
yeah,
stuff because, the director, when he's doing the storyboards, he couldn't fully anticipate what the choreography of the action sequences was going to be in all cases.
yeah,
So those action sequences with a lot of stunt and fight choreography are what evolves the most from the boards. And those are prevised. Live action prevised, with stunt performers in
yeah,
place of the
yeah. They'll
actors.
just like use their phones or whatever, right? They'll just go shoot.
Exactly. But the bar has really been raised in recent years. Like they do kind of just use their phones or like something more above their phones, like an A7S, but they have like gimbals and they do editing and they'll do like lighting stuff and
Oh, wow.
effects, blood effects. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
seen a lot of really well done previs.
there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, having not read this script, I could just as easily see this being like a gritty, Jason Bourne kind of action sequence laden thing, but there's something clever there's a cleverness to the staging and the choreography, and a lot of it, even though these are like super violent fights, they have big laughs in them. Like they're really funny, and they break the tension even in the middle, and sometimes they're just badass, like when she goes into the dark room with the flaming axe and goes to town. And some of that stuff, to me, like I look at it, and it's just it's a marvel to imagine how you conceive of that, like how you come up with that, with the concept for that sequence. And even with storyboards, make sure that, and it worked. Make sure that we know where we are in space, unless we're not supposed to know where we are in space because it's dark, and kind of know what the threat is, and also, like, there's a lot of reaction, there's a lot of acting in the fights too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that was one of the things that attracted me to the project in the first place was I saw the director Kirill, his first film, Why Don't You Just Die, which is
Mm-hmm.
a low budget Russian film. It's a chamber piece that takes place all in one apartment, and it's a Russian film. And halfway through the movie, I hadn't read the script yet. Halfway through watching his first movie, I called my agent and I said, I'm 100% in. Let's
Oh,
schedule
really?
this meeting. And it had that same, push and pull between action and violence and set piece stuff, and then also humor and performance. And it's all kind of mixed together in a way that I found really inspiring.
So how do you balance that? I mean, like, how do you,
Hmm.
like, and this just might be me reading into it, but it's like certain lenses are going to like play a performance better than they are an action beat. And did it inform the kind of lenses that you would use, or the kind of lighting you would use, or the kind of camera movement you would use to kind of invoke these really clever, well executed, and also extremely violent beats?
I think it did. In general, we used, Carell's thing is he really wants to see what's happening, right? And he loves detail and texture and color, and he just wants as much image as he can get. So he likes using wider lenses, so you're always keeping the performers in the context of their environment. And he also likes stopping down so that the background is sharper than it is in a lot of contemporary films. The I actually really like wide open, large format, shallow depth of field.
Mm-hmm.
Aesthetically, it's a great look. It's a beautiful look, but we wanted to do the opposite of that here. We really wanted to use wide lenses, stop down, have everything look more like an old movie, like movies used to look, when they were shooting on film and they were afraid of blowing the focus, so they just stopped down, you
Yeah.
know? And the sets were beautifully designed, and the costumes, and we staged the action at various depths from the camera. But I think those, just wanting to see as much as we could at all times, was one of the biggest foundational blocks that we built the aesthetic off of.
Mm.
And it does help with the action sequences. It helps keep everything. It's easier to have humor and action at the same time when you're in a wide frame that's stopped down, so you can see something happening in the foreground
Yeah.
and something happening in the background, and the
How,
camera's
how
moving
like
around it. It's all,
how
you
wide are
know,
we talking? Like, what were your main lenses?
a lot. When the camera starts really flying around, we were pretty much on a 16 for the most part.
Whoa.
Yeah,
And
anytime the
what size
camera's
sensor?
like zipping
What
around.
what camera? What size sensor?
This was an Alexa 35,
Okay.
and these were Panavision VAs, which are large format, new lenses, but they have a vintage inspired look.
Mm.
They're meant to evoke the look of the K35s, and they do. I mean, ours were detuned, so they took on a lot of different, unique optical characteristics that distinguish them from the K35 look even more than they already are. But yeah, they're beautiful modern lenses that have a softer vintage feel. And they're small, they're light, and they made it easy to move the camera around, and have it execute dynamic dynamic movements.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Were you operating the camera for the most part, or did you have an operator that you worked
No,
with?
we worked with a couple operators that were both very talented. And I think for me, I love operating the camera, but on these bigger shows where there's a lot going on, I find my philosophy is this: operating the camera is a full-time job.
Mm.
Being a cinematographer is also a full-time job. They are not the same full-time job. So I feel that I need to delegate the operation of the camera to someone who can focus on that exclusively, because it can be uh, setting up from calling cut on one shot that you got to calling action on the next setup. That camera operator, they can be busy the entire time between those two points working on getting that shot ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that shot also has to be lit. So it's like if you're operating and you need that entire time just to dial in the camera, lay the dolly track, finesse it, when are you going to do the lighting,
Mm.
And that's kind of where I like to step back and focus a little bit more on the lighting and the bigger picture stuff, and let the operator handle the execution of the shots.
Yeah, yeah. And did you, I mean, just out of curiosity, did you find that like with a
Mhm.
16 millimeter lens or, shooting generally wide, um, uh, like was there ever an issue of like, oh, we can't see this, or, like there's an air ram or some stunt wire, some effects rig or
Oh yeah.
something that like now it's fully in the shot and we got to move, we have to make everything like what challenges did that create, I guess?
I think we knew going in, because we were going to shoot all of these very difficult to shoot shots, and like
Mm.
impossible type of shots are just happening constantly, right? We knew that we needed a lot of rigging and a lot of cables and wires and stuff like that, and a lot of lighting from above. And so we made the decision really early in prep that we weren't going to build a ceiling on any of the sets.
Oh,
There's really only one set that had a ceiling, which is the big long hallway,
yeah.
because it's just so long, and it would have been crazy if we didn't have a ceiling on that because you can see so much depth. But pretty much none of the other sets that are proper rooms um had, like the lobby, her bedroom, the green room that she's in, um the prison, all of those, they have no ceiling.
Yeah.
So we were just constantly seeing bad stuff. And the great thing about seeing one bad thing that you're not supposed to see in a shot means that it already is a VFX shot, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a ceiling and you're on an ultra wide lens, and we're often low looking up, the ceiling is going to be VFX. So, because the way that VFX vendors charge productions is basically by shot.
Hmm.
Like of course it's the extent of the work in a shot, but the biggest charge is just a shot needing to be touched at all in the first place. So when you're already inside of a VFX shot, it's easy and it's very easy to ask, the
Oh,
producers, the
yeah.
VFX
Hey, can you
supervisor,
paint
like,
out
hey,
that
can you
cable?
clean this up? Can you
Yeah.
do this or this? And so like every shot is already a VFX shot in the movie, kind of, because of this ceiling issue.
And I guess a
It
ceiling is
was,
is a pretty easy VFX.
yeah,
It's like all hard surface, and it's not,
yeah,
you're not really looking at it.
yeah.
No one's going to scrutinize it, but you can make a pretty
So
convincing
yeah,
ceiling.
and I was able to get away with murder in terms of putting stuff in the frame because I just knew everything was already going to be a VFX shot. So you can have dolly track, you can have lights here and there.
Oh,
It
interesting.
was it
Okay.
was pretty chill in terms of that. Yeah.
There's like a real playfulness to the way the camera operates too, and
Hmm.
and just kind of curious about like how do you, if you're looking at a storyboard, I mean, like if you're looking at a board, you could, there's still so much room for interpretation on your part, and obviously
Yes,
the director's there
absolutely.
telling you what they want, but like how, what are there any secrets in your opinion to like how to infuse the camera work with the level of playfulness that you did? Because it feels like it's not winking at the audience, but it's sort of like there's like a sense of like, oh, you want to see this, here you go. Like there's throughout the whole movie there's kind of like I think of movies that play really well at Fantastic Fest or you know, at horror festivals where people are just going to cheer just by the way it's shot or the way the camera work goes because it's playing into what you want to see as an audience. How does that, I mean, like, is that just you channeling what you want to see? You know, is like, and I'm talking about like, if it's a dolly shot, the velocity of the dolly
Hmm.
or the
Hmm.
kind of the impact that it has or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. Even though you have storyboards, everything is also figured out for real on the set. You know,
Yeah.
because it's one thing to have this black and white rudimentary two-dimensional drawing, and it's another thing to put it in front of a camera with the actor and the lighting and all of that. And I think, we really did execute the boards faithfully. That said, I think one thing that was great about this film and I try to do on all my projects is in the first week or so when you get a sense of what the boards or the language that's been designed beforehand is getting at stylistically, you see where it's going and my instinct, what I like to do is just to try to double down on everything as much as possible,
Mm.
right? So once you see, hey, this fast camera motion that we're doing, this type of movement, this is working, well, you try to think, okay, well, how can I do that same thing again and again and again? Like
Mm.
to build, and then that just increases the consistency, the internal consistency of the language of the film, right? So if you do a fast push in on someone's face once, well, that's not language, you know? But if you do it once and it works really well, and then you do that again six more times in the movie that you hadn't been planning to originally, now you have expanded the vocabulary of the film,
Yeah.
the cinematic language of it. And so I'm always looking for opportunities to do that. And I think the boards, when we began executing them, we saw in practice, okay, this type of movement, this type of speed, this type work is working really well for us or not working so well for us. And then we were able to say, hey, we did this. Remember that thing that we did before? Well, what if instead of what the board is doing, what if we just did that same thing again?
Mm.
And then that gives the film more of its own language.
That's cool. That's cool. And you know, there's a lot of like in a sense that the film feels a little bit like a video game in that we're like going through levels and there's like the level where they're all kind of in the ductwork of the building crawling around and it feels really constrained.
Hmm.
But
Absolutely.
what how did you guys go about approaching that? I mean, obviously it's a set, but like, you know, how to get light in there, how small was that in reality? Was it, you know, were you using were there no ceilings in that or you know was that a cheat at all or was that what it looked like on screen?
That was so the crawl space tunnels
Mm-hmm.
were we built a modular system, right? It was kind of a maze that you
Mm-hmm.
could reconfigure depending on the needs of the shot. And so you could have a really long corridor, you could build, twists and turns. And also it was comprised of modules, these little pieces that I think each individual piece was no more than about, I want to say 3 meters long.
Okay.
And you have a couple dozen of those that build the whole thing. And it was four walls, it was the ceiling, the two walls, and the floor. But then each of those pieces was modular internally. So you could pull the ceiling of any piece.
Mm-hmm.
You could pull either wall of each piece. And that allowed us to execute any shot. There were only a couple shots where we really had to do something, modify a piece in a specific bespoke way. There's one shot where she takes a turn
Mm-hmm.
and the camera is just leading her through the turn. And we had to build that, a turn that had a double pulled wall. And then the wall is VFX'd in, like the
Yeah.
ceiling had been, the missing wall. And then
And then
there's
there
like
are like
a piece where
fights in
she
there though.
hides in like a ceiling in rafters. We built those
Yeah.
rafters above one of the pieces. Yeah, there's fights in there. Yeah.
And like, you know, choreographing and shooting and lighting and everything a fight in such I'm sure that it's existed, but I can't think of an extensive fight scene that I've ever seen that was shot in such a constrained location.
Yeah. No, you might be right. You might be right. I can't think of one
Mm.
either, because there's a lot of action in these
Yeah.
tunnels. That was one of the things that immediately drew me in when I read the script, was how much of the action felt like potentially something I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was difficult. Look, we spent a lot of time in those tunnels. We spent a lot of time on many things in this film. We had a decent schedule. We shot for 45 days.
Oh, nice.
So not, massive, not like a blockbuster schedule, but also, more than double like an indie schedule.
Yeah, 45 days is enough to get a lot,
Mhm.
because there's like a lot of persnickety stuff that I think was
Yeah.
practical. Like, well, actually, I'll ask you, was the eyeball practical or parts of the
Yes,
eyeball?
the eyeball
It looked
was,
practical.
there's no VFX eyeball in the film at all. Every single shot, the
Yeah.
eyeball is
I don't
practical.
want to spoil it for people because it was one of my signature favorite moments, but there's an eyeball that kind of crawls along using its optic nerve as a leg. That is that is definitely the bad guys following our hero to figure out, and sort of Beastmaster style transmitting what it sees to all the bad guys. It really, really cool, funny, kind of Evil Dead feeling, like over the top crazy thing to have in it. And it's stuff like that to me make it so memorable.
Absolutely. The eyeball is probably my favorite part of the whole movie.
Yeah.
It's the eyeball is an icon now.
Was that like was that a tough thing to execute? Like, was that, I mean, it seems like a persnickety
It
kind of a
was,
thing.
it's puppetry
Mhm.
is difficult. Um because every movement needs to be controlled by a different function
Yeah.
operated by a different puppeteer, right? So it's like the eyeball turning side to side is different than it looking up and down, and that's different than it crawling. That's like suddenly you have three people with six cables on there, and you got one person looking up and down, one person looking left and right, and another pushing it along.
Mhm.
And it's tricky when it's in tight spaces and you have all these people around it, and it's really hard. It's really, really hard to do that practical puppetry work. But it's worth it because you see it and you just know it was executed practically. It's funny. It's like, as good as VFX and CGI get, there's still just no replacement for the real thing.
I
Like, you
agree.
just know. Audiences just know if that
That's
character's
when
VFX or
people
not,
are like constantly pitching to me like why AI is going to replace everything. I'm like, but people don't. I mean, like, if you're telling me you're going to use AI to clean up, paint something out or add a building in the background, like I don't think anyone's going to notice it or care.
Yeah.
But it's like when you have like a hero effect like this, yeah, could AI pull something like that off? Sure. But it wouldn't.
Yes.
It wouldn't. I couldn't tell you what it is, but there is something so tactile about it. About when I was
Mm-hmm.
watching it, if you had
Mm-hmm.
told me it was visual effects, I would have been like, oh, okay, but like it felt like a thing that was on the set that was real, and maybe
Yeah.
the visual effects were painting out the rods or painting out the cables
Mm-hmm.
or however
Mm-hmm.
you were
Yeah.
moving it around.
The rods were painted out. There are a lot of VFX work in all of the shots of the eyeball,
Of
because
course.
the puppeteer rig needs to be painted out.
Yeah. But I mean, it was just such, I mean, like I burst out laughing because it was like so gross and appropriate to the story. And also like, I just never really seen anything like that before. There was a lot of that, in this movie, especially the climax, which I don't want to really ruin for anyone, but, let's just say that there's an item that talks that I was pretty awesome. I don't know, it was pretty awesome, and it looked great. And I feel like in that climax, you have all kinds of environmental stuff going on in that room too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so I'm assuming you had special effects, but also what kind of what kind of approach to the lighting, what approach to the camera did you need to take for that stuff?
Just the whole climactic
Yeah, the
sequence in the
climax, which I
freezer.
don't know. I guess we can talk about it. Like, it's in the attic or whatever of this
Yeah.
building, and there's a pig head and it talks. So,
Mm-hmm.
spoiler alert. Anyway, but like the temperature changes and like everything,
Yeah.
it goes nuts in there, as it
Hmm.
should, but
Yes, yes.
like, so like, uh, uh I'm always curious, how do you like, how do you plan that out? How do you plan the arc of that out? How do you keep track of it while you're doing it? I know it's kind of boring logistics, but like, are you just going through it one stage at a time and knocking them off? Do you kind of know your end game lighting and lens wise? Like what's the arc of your lighting and lens approach in a sequence like that?
I think for me, the key item that I try to crack in any sequence or set really is how I think about it is how can I do most of the lighting needs for every shot in one big broad stroke
Mm,
that doesn't require moving lights around shot to shot. And in this case, the concept was to have, because we don't see much daylight. I mean, the whole film takes place at night, and now it's finally day, and there's these skylights. We wanted to have our first daylight in the movie coming down and big dramatic shafts. So we hazed it up so that we had the shafts. We had 18Ks out there um, to create enough light. And I was hoping that they would come through, hit the ground, and then that would bounce and fill the space with enough ambient light to shoot almost everything in. And then at the end, where the pig's head is, there are all these candles around it, which is what we use to motivate the light on the actors as they stand around the pig's head. Now,
mm,
the 18Ks, unfortunately, didn't do as much work as I'd been hoping because there was just a section of this was kind of a location. I mean, it was in the same facility as our stages, but it was more of like an empty warehouse that
mm.
had existing skylights. And there was this big long section in the middle that didn't have a skylight. So there was no skylight to put light through. And that became like a really dark black hole. And that's where that final fight takes place. So that was kind of a problem. And we didn't realize that until a little too late, where we get in there, everything's lit, and it's like, ooh, it's really dark in here, actually. And then at the pig's head, again, the candles weren't really doing as much light
Mm.
as I didn't really expect that they would. I knew I was going to have to supplement it, but still, that is not practical candlelight you're seeing on the actors at any point. So I had to rig a couple lights in that dark section, and I had every single shot where they're standing around the pig's head. I had to have a lot of lights on the floor on like flicker gags, supplementing the candlelight. So that was one of the least successful sets for me in terms of the broad strokes lighting, practical lighting, environmental lighting working. I had to do a lot of supplementation there, which is especially difficult when you consider the complexity of a lot of the shots that we had to execute in there,
Hmm.
with camera movement, with action, with creature work. It made that probably the most challenging sequence in the film to shoot. And it was fortunate that we were in there for 9 days.
Oh, wow. It's a
So
lot.
we kind of had time on our side, but everything else was against us.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that happens in that sequence too. It's a huge
A
sequence.
lot. A lot.
And I mean, like, do you, okay, so when you're in a sequence like that for 9 days, do you get,
Hmm.
I'm not, I'm asking honestly, like, how do you keep track of it and keep yourself from getting lost in where you are, or, like digging a hole for yourself accidentally, like, oh yeah, we already saw that side and we didn't have XYZ. Like, how do you prepare to make sure that you're able to, cohesively do it and not have, uh, I might be speaking out of personal experience here, but like, how do you cover your ass and make sure that
Yeah.
that it all flows and that it all makes sense, and that, I mean, you have your boards, but it's just like 9 days is enough time to get lost in something.
Yeah. I realized something pretty quickly about that sequence when we were shooting it that was kind of it was going to cause a lot of risk and vulnerability on my side, but it was also the solution to a lot of my problems. Basically, I realized that that whole sequence, it's kind of divided in a binary between when they're facing the pig's head and interacting with it, and then when we're outside of that, like when they're approaching
Mm.
and when the fight's happening. And I realized that in order to make this sequence work in both pieces, it was actually two entirely different lighting setups. And I just
Mm.
had to be really careful that I didn't have to bridge between them. You know, the shots that kind of felt like they were gonna transfer from the altar into the room or not, I had to be super, super careful about, and at times maybe even pitch, breaking them up, being like, look, I just can't do it. I can't light it over here and over here at the same time. Because what I realized was one of those 18Ks, the one that's closest to the altar, it needed to be in two totally different places
Oh.
for different shots. And it's a big thing to move it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like
You
when
got to
they're
get
at the
somebody outside
altar.
the building to like go up there and like
Oh
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah. We had a whole team up there,
yeah.
but still, it's like a 20+ minute process, and because everything is like rigged up there, there's a lot of safety concerns. It's
Yeah.
we built this truss up there. The actors are below, and so we needed to, when they're at the altar, we needed to have the light not hit the altar area and actually kind of come above and land like behind them so
Mhm.
that the altar area wasn't getting blasted with all this bright daylight and washed out the candlelight look. And we also needed to move boards around on the roof to like shape the 18 more, shape the shaft to like really keep it off of the altar. That's what keeps the altar feeling like this dark, dramatic firelight look, even though there's an 18K right there.
Yeah.
And then when we're not at the altar and we're in that open space where the fight occurs at the end, the 18K needed to be opposite. It needed to be blasting the area right where they're actually standing
Mhm.
in the altar scene to keep that direct, big, intense, super hot, hard to work with light off of the area that we needed to do the fight in. And so we had to hop. We had to hop that. Realized that right away, that if I tried to shoot anything in either of those pieces with the light, in the same place. Like if I just kept, there was no way to just put the light and have it work for everything. And I saw that right away. And even though it cost me like 20 minutes to move the light back and forth, like a dozen plus times, which sucked.
Yeah.
It's also to answer your question, it's like how I kind of cracked, like, we're going to keep this consistent. We're going to have a game plan, and we're not going to have focus creep these 5 days. It's just about maintaining the look by the altar and maintaining the look in the larger space.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that movie. Is it okay to talk about Faces of Death a little bit too? Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
again we had planned to talk about They Will Kill You,
Hmm.
but last night I went to an advanced screening of Faces of Death, which is really interesting. It's an interesting property because Faces of Death is kind of notorious, like Mondo Cane or something like that, like one of those forbidden fruit kind of VHS tapes that we all saw in a video store in the 80s that you were afraid to pick up. But the name is imprinted on your brain. When I first heard that they'd made a Faces of Death movie, or that they were going, I think I heard about it before they made it. It was like, oh yeah, never occurred to me that that's kind of an IP worth doing something interesting with. And I feel
Hmm.
like the approach was really interesting and clever. Like it's a very clever movie, much more clever than the original Faces of Death are, I imagine, because that was basically just a giant hoax. But talk to me about how you came to work on Faces of Death, because it's honestly like stylistically almost night and day from They Will Kill You. It's a very different looking film.
Hmm. Yes, it is. In some ways, the thing that links them is that they're both inspired by the cinematography of older films, like
Mm.
the way things used to be. There's a discussion in cinematography circles now. It's like, why don't movies look like movies anymore?
Yeah.
And so they're both meant to look like movies used to look. I would say that's definitely shared in their DNA. Um, they Will Kill You is a lot more playful. It's brighter, it's more vibrant, it's more kinetic, and it's just bigger and splashier.
Yeah.
Faces of Death is more about creating that atmosphere of dread.
Yeah.
It's about mood and tone and creating a world that feels very real and disturbing at the same time. And in with Faces of Death, we shot on film.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we did. We shot it on 35.
Sweet.
And yes, yeah. We kind of had to. The original has such a filmic look,
Mhm.
We wanted to bring a little bit of that. Although the look of our film wasn't necessarily inspired by the original, we did feel that it needed to have that same celluloid quality to it. Although we shot 35 and theirs was like grainy
Yeah, theirs is
1970s
like
16.
16 and
Yeah.
Super 8 in some instances, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Yeah.
Yours, I mean,
So,
correct me if I'm wrong. It felt very Manhunter. It felt like the Michael Mann movie Manhunter. And there's even one shot in particular where the killer has like a stocking on his face and he pulls it up right over his nose or right to his nose. And I'm like, that's the iconic shot of Francis Dolarhyde in Manhunter.
absolutely. It was inspired by Manhunter as well as Silence of the Lambs, which
You could do
which
worse.
yeah,
Love
the
that movie.
director and I watched because as much as Faces of Death is a horror movie, it's also kind of a detective procedural film in a way. Even though our protagonist isn't a detective or a law enforcement officer at all, she is it is an investigative thriller
Hmm.
nonetheless. And we looked to Silence of the Lambs and Manhunters as much as we looked to horror cinema for our inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue Silence of the Lambs. People will say it's a thriller. It's a thriller. I'm like, I don't know.
Hmm.
You've got a guy cutting a paramedic's face off and wearing it to get it.
Yeah.
It's not a paramedic. Excuse me, a cop. He gets away from the paramedics. But Silence of the Lambs, is I think one of the most horrifying films ever made, and it's so
Hmm.
good. I mean,
Yeah.
like you could do
Yeah.
worse for inspiration. Tak Fujimoto,
Hmm.
friggin' legend.
Seven as well kind of rides that line
Yeah,
between is this an investigative thriller or is it a horror movie? It's
yeah,
kind of both.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's one of the things that we've lost in this digital era, I think, is the darkness of some of the shadow regions, especially if you look at like talking about Manhunter and going back to the 80s nighttime exterior sequences. The films people were shooting on slower stock back then, and they were also stopping down because they were shooting on film.
Yeah.
And so you're shooting at like wide open, I imagine would have been like a 2.8, but they were shooting at a 4 on like ASA 250 stock
Yeah.
outside at
Especially
night.
back then. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't see anything. Like it's just night times in those movies, night exteriors. It's just blackness. And then just whatever the film crew could light is
Mm.
exposed, you know? And that look just does not exist anymore because with the Alexa 35, you can shoot ISO 2560 and you're also seeing your focus. You can open up to a 1.4. It's like you've got 5 or 6 stops more light now than you had back then
Well, yeah,
in
back then, I
night
mean, like when
exteriors.
Darius Kanji's shooting 7, he's using the
Yeah.
ENR process to do silver retention and desaturate the colors and make it super super contrasty. But even back then, I remember things like Three Kings, where they're
Hmm.
or Summer of Sam, where they're shooting on cross processed reversal film so they're losing stop. They don't have
Yeah.
nearly
Yeah.
the kind of dynamic range that today's cameras
Yeah.
have, and the colors were popping and kind of garish, and that's the look they were going for. And it was kind of like an
Yes.
interesting thing. And the thing is, like, you could go into literally any color correction software and dial in any of those looks, but nobody does. You
Hmm.
could,
Right.
especially if you shot it to look like that, you could certainly make it look like that, but everybody, this is maybe something we should talk about on the podcast more, but that, movies don't look like movies anymore because movie cameras get like so much detail, and all detail feels almost equally attended to.
Correct. Bingo.
Mm.
Uh, and that is definitely something that I try to go for is having it feel like as soon as there's not enough light, it just falls off a cliff, the exposure. It's a combination of things, and I think the technology is the biggest thing. I think it's so easy to get that exposure. It's like, you put one light in the foreground now on your talent, and then it just fills the whole,
Yeah.
then suddenly there's just no shadows, there's no dark area because the camera is so sensitive. I think that's the biggest factor is is because, like you said, it's about dynamic range. The thing you need to crack to get a stronger and more filmic look is how do I how can I effectively reduce the capabilities of my camera? How
Yeah.
do I decrease the dynamic range? How do I make it harder for myself as a cinematographer to get an exposure?
Yeah.
And so that's counterintuitive. And I think that's another major hurdle.
And also, like when you're dealing with, I mean, I don't pretend to know what happens on something like Loki, but I imagine you've
Mhm.
got Marvel execs, you've got Disney execs, and probably every setup is scrutinized and notes are given and notes were given beforehand. And there's a look that you're expected to get. But when you're making something like Faces of Death or They Will Kill You, like I think about that shot in They Will Kill You. It's even in the trailer where she's like backing down the hall and the lights are going out one by one. And it's like the darkness is chasing her, and it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful, kind of a beautiful dance with the light. And then in Faces of Death, there's so many scenes where it just gets where it's very, very dark. I now that you say it's shot on film, I didn't know it was shot on film. Like that totally makes sense. Like it's making me think a little bit about Strange Darling that came out a couple of years ago, and there's just something different about the way it looks. Of course, the first the the first title card that comes up in that movie is this movie was shot on 35 millimeter film. So like they wanted you to know. But
Yeah.
but yeah, that's interesting. And like, is it tempting to not do that? Because also you got to make your days if you're complicating your life or doing stuff like that. It just makes it a little bit harder for you, right? Or like, is it just built into the working ethos, and then the machine chugs the way the machine chugs once you get the shot, once you get the shoot rolling?
I think the machine is fairly efficient regardless of whether you're shooting film or digital in my experience. The
Mm,
issue that we ran into on Faces of Death and that you often run into when you're shooting on film is just the amount of stock that you can afford
mm,
versus your, budget. It's like, we got into a situation on Faces of Death where we had about 72 minutes of footage per day budgeted, and we had multiple days in a row, enough that it seemed like, hey, maybe this is just what we're shooting every day, where we were shooting about 90 to 95 minutes worth of stock.
mm.
And that is when you're shooting a lower budget movie and there's no margin for error, and film is as it is as expensive as it is, that can be a serious problem. And so I think it's a question of navigating, all right, can we be more focused? Can we do less takes? And are we getting what we need? Are we getting all of the setups that we need? Are we getting enough takes to get the performance what we need?
Yeah.
Finding that balance between what you can afford and how much material, therefore, you can acquire, can be tricky. And we did struggle with it on Faces of Death.
Really, really.
Hmm. Yes.
It's funny because, when you get to that level of, I don't know what your budget was, but when you get to the level
Mhm.
where it's like, yeah, this is a theatrical feature with name actors and stuff like that in it. I always think that like the film stock budget can't really, isn't going to move the needle as much as you're
Yeah.
saying it does.
Yeah, it's just that everything moves the needle. When you're on a movie, no matter the
Yeah.
scale of the movie, no department is allowed to go over budget
No,
ever.
no, that's true. I just like when I went to film
So it's
school,
like,
we were still shooting only
yeah,
on film at that time. And I remember like me and all my classmates would like, come up with a shooting ratio of like 7-1 or something like, and it was like, we just can't afford it because we're,
yeah,
every time that camera was rolling, I just heard the sound of my bank account emptying. And,
yes,
and
yes,
in the digital world, like obviously you can just shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, and you just got to go get some hard drives and you're fine. But anyway, I don't know. It's interesting to hear, but I think that it got you the effect that you were going for. I mean, I definitely
absolutely,
felt those
absolutely.
influences. There's one
Oh
scene
yeah,
towards the end where they open up a door or something and they're flooded with red light, and I'm like, I did make me think about when they were going down into Hannibal Lecter's cell at the beginning, and they turn on those red lights around everybody. It's just gorgeous stuff.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I know that's a great moment when they're walking into his garage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I mean, it's so cool. I hope more people see it. I feel
I
like
hope so too.
the vibe on Faces of Death. Just I think that, like, I hope people realize it's not an extension in any way of the original thing, and you're not really going to be looking at footage from the original thing, and whatever footage you're going to see is all the fake stuff from the original thing. But yeah, no, I think it's wonderful, and I hope people go check that, and They Will Kill You out. I think they're both just amazing pieces of work. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we go, do you have an Instagram or a website or anything you would encourage people to check out online?
Yeah, everything is under my name, Isaac Bauman. My
Okay.
Instagram handle's just my name.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you very much, Ben.
All right, that was Isaac Bauman. Isaac, hey, thank you so much for being on the show again. That was great.
Yeah, hopefully he'll come back again. He actually said he has I believe, a TV series he's working on right now. So
That's exciting. All right, Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about our pet obsessions. What is your pet obsession this week?
my pet obsession is a movie that I saw in a theater on a big screen.
Hey!
And it might still be playing when you hear my voice here. So if it is, go check it out. It's a Japanese film called Exit 8. I'm going to butcher everyone's name, but it's directed by Genki Kawamura and shot by Keisuke Imamura. And it's really cool. It's like a Twilight Zone episode kind of a thing where I guess it's based on a video game, but our main character is like he finds out that his girlfriend is pregnant while he's on the subway, and as he's going to his exit, he finds himself in a hallway where there just isn't anybody except this one creepy guy keeps passing him, and as he walks, the same creepy guy keeps walking past him, and he looks on the wall and sees that there's like directions of what he has to do, and he has to like look for anomalies, and if there's an anomaly, turn around, and if there isn't an anomaly, keep going, and he'll eventually get to the 8th exit, which is where he's trying to go. And it felt like Rod Serling was going to walk out and give us an introduction. The whole movie, for the most part, like at the very beginning, we're on the subway, and I don't want to say how it ends, but for most of the movie, we're in this hallway, and you'll be in it for about 5 minutes, and then you're going to find yourself like looking for anomalies and trying to figure out what the anomaly could be that would make him turn around or not turn around. And it does kind of a structural thing, not unlike Weapons, where it kind of introduces other characters. So like the creepy guy he sees walking the other direction, it kind of gets his own chapter. And there's also a kid in there, and the kid gets his own chapter. And it's beautiful. Like the cinematography is fantastic. And it's one of those movies where you go like, okay, you have a very limited location and you really made the most of it. Like it really goes for it and does extremely interesting stuff within that location. And it's beautiful, and the acting is great, and it's well edited, it's well put together, and it had me on the edge of my seat because it's a mystery box. I mean, that's I guess what every Twilight Zone episode is, kind of a mystery box. This was a mystery box trying to figure out where the hell it could be going, and it doesn't fail to satisfy. And I wouldn't call it a slow burn. It's a little bit of a simmer. You're on a simmer, but there's always something completely bizarre happening. So definitely go check it out. I think it's solid work.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How about yourself, Ilya? What are you all about this week? You're about to go to NAB. And I bet that's not what you're about to talk about. Anyway,
definitely not. I talked about it last week, but it's funny. Your short end's a mystery box. My short end is also a mystery box. So my short end is a book, actually, which, I don't actually get into books very often on this show.
Book.
Yeah, exactly. It's this thing. It's made of paper. It's like you turn the pages. I know. You can also listen to an audiobook version, which is
okay. Well, that's more satisfying. There's an electronic way to consume this. Go on. Yeah.
It is called I'm starting to worry about this black box of doom.
It's the guy who wrote John Dies at the End.
Is.
Yeah, I haven't read it. Yeah.
I was going to say, as someone who's such a huge fan of John Dies at the End, I was like, you should be reading I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. It is really, really good and super entertaining.
He's a great writer.
There's a certain amount of...
It's Jason Pargin, is that his name?
That's right, Jason Pargin.
Yeah.
And, I did just a Google search because I know how you are. He wrote, as of 1 year ago, almost exactly, March of 2025, on his Facebook page that there are discussions going on, but as of yet, all movie and TV rights to I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom are still available. So if you were interested in optioning your very own, book to turn into something from the guy who wrote John Dies at the End, you should look into this, Ben. I think you might really enjoy it.
I should read the book. I've heard about the book, and I know he's got a new book coming out that's in the John Dies at the End series coming out pretty soon. He has an interesting. I don't usually get into people's TikTok / Instagram whatever feed, but he has a really interesting social media presence, and he did a TikTok about. Specifically, like, if you're not Stephen King, if you're not like one of the most successful writers in the world,
what you have to do to sell a book these days. Yes, I saw that.
How much?
It's great.
Yeah. How much? Yeah. It's and to me, it's kind of like it's a little depressing because I'm like, I look at him and I go, oh, that's a very successful writer, and it's like, no, he's like spends 80% of his time making TikTok videos just to get anyone to pay any attention to him.
He's like, this is the new way. This is the new way that people discover books and discover things, and it's like. I think that's really true. I think that if you aren't someone who's super well established in that top 1%, it's possibly even harder now to stand out in whatever it is that you do, including for people who ostensibly are successful writers. So,
well, I've read John Dies at the End because I love the movie so much, and then the sequel to that is This Book is Full of Spiders. Seriously, don't open it.
Yeah,
and that's also great. So,
well,
he's awesome.
I happen to love. I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom, and it's a wonderfully long title. It's even longer than Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I think that if more people discover it, it could be a real phenomenon. I think that you might enjoy it as well. So I don't want to tell you anything about it because I don't want to give it away. It's a little...
Well, I've read the summary. I mean, I know roughly what it's about, but yeah.
So, for our listeners, I'll give the quick summary. Outside of Los Angeles, a driver pulls up to find a young woman sitting on a large black box. She offers him $200,000 cash to transport her and her box across the country to Washington, D.C. But there are rules. He can't look inside the box. He cannot ask questions. He cannot tell anyone. They must leave immediately, and he must leave all trackable devices behind. I think it's a great setup for the story, and that's more or less exactly what happens. So,
cool. Well, I got to read it.
Well, there wouldn't be a story if he said no, but the driver does in fact say yes, and what happens from that point is told through various perspectives, and it's just a really fun ride. It's a fun ride from beginning to end.
Cool. I'll have to check it out.
All right. So, Ben, I think that just about does it for this show. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
You can find me at benrock.com, just the way it sounds. And you can also find me on, places like LinkedIn or Instagram, Facebook, whatever, Blue Sky. I'm still on Twitter, but I don't really go on Twitter anymore. So how about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
Next week, you can find me at NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters. I'll be in booth C8735. After that, you can find me at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. So, Ben, who do we have to thank? Who made this show possible?
As always, we have to thank Alana Cody, who is our producer / editor, who arranged this awesome interview and all the other interviews, and then edits them. So it's like she's it's a Sisyphean task she's doing, and I don't know which part of it is the buzzard eating her pancreas, but it's a lot of work. And then
I only think about the boulder rolling down the hill. Is it really? Is there a buzzard eating a pancreas? Is that part of that?
Yeah, I think that's part of Sisyphus. And then we also have to thank Kay Zalatrakshy, who composed all the music that you hear in the podcast. And check out Kay's website, musicbykays.com. Go to Kay's YouTube channel, Kay's Labs, and watch Kay's fix synthesizers. And for God's sakes, hire Kay's to do a score for you.
Ben, just because you've got a big love of John Dies at the End, so you know, this new book coming out is book number 5 in the John Dies at the End series. There's 5.
Oh, I thought it was number 3.
Oh, no, it's number 5.
Oh, I have more John dies at the end than I even knew about.
That's right. And this latest book is called "There Are No Giant Crabs in This Novel." And then that's the title. Then below that is "A Novel of Giant Crabs."
That sounds on very on brand.
All right, so Ben, that's it for this episode. Do you want to take us out?
Why not? Thanks for tuning in. This has been Cinepod, the cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory at hotrodcameras.com. Watch and subscribe to our show on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and interact with us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn, but not X. Don't do that. Thanks for tuning in.